And this was just completely different. This was, leading the promotions business. I didn't even know what promotions was. It was leading 50 people. I'd never led more than 4 or 5 on a project. So it was very exciting.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rodolfo from the European Wayfair team. I actually have 2 teams that I am currently leading. One is in promotions, leading everything supplier related. And the other side is on our retail tech and analytics. And that's also supply related, but with a different focus. And today I'm wearing the promotions hat, and I'm here talking to Saskia Meier-Andrae, who is leading a lot of teams here. She's leading brand, creative, commercial programs, promotions, and PR.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Great to see you.
All right, so Saskia, I separated a couple questions here because I think you're a very interesting Wayfairian to talk to. Your background is very interesting. I looked into your LinkedIn profile and I have a lot of questions. So why don't we get started? And I think I'll just start with a very basic question. How did you end up at Wayfair?
How did I end up at Wayfair? So I got a telephone call, a cold call back in 2016 from the European CEO, from Martin Reiter. And I just had this like deep Austrian voice which boomed at me, do you want to lead the European promotions team? And he spoke to me a little bit about the role, and it was, about leading Wayfair's European promotions team. It was a team of about, 50 people at the time. And even though I was not looking for anything outside of my current role, I was working for a consultancy. It really caught my attention because up till then, I had only received calls from headhunters, which had offered me positions around, sort of the typical positions that consultants get, like business development, leading a small strategy team, having like 2 to 3 people, like essentially doing the work that you're currently doing, but in-house. And this was just completely different. This was, leading the promotions business. I didn't even know what promotions was. It was leading 50 people. I'd never led more than 4 or 5 on a project. So it was very exciting. And it was a bit of a process for me to get there because I am actually not the most sort of entrepreneurial person who straight away takes a new opportunity. I'm quite cautious. Looking at Wayfair, it convinced me on every level, and then I joined.
Interesting. So you were not looking for anything specific, and you're very cautious. How is that transition from consulting, every few months or so, talking to a different client, to coming to Wayfair and leading a big team, and just being the head of promotions in Europe?
Yeah, it was. So moving from consultancy over to Wayfair was definitely a big jump for me. Consultancy was the only job that I had ever done. I'd done it for 10 years and I knew it very well. So, even though every couple of months, it was a new project, like I knew what it was like to be a consultant. Moving to Wayfair, I just suddenly realized that I had a gigantic learning curve ahead of me because, I'd suddenly been given a team of 50 people. And like I said, I'd only led 4 or 5 beforehand. And I had the illusion of being a fabulous people leader. And then I realized I actually hadn't led anyone really, because leading a project team of 4 to 5 people is a very, very different thing than even leading 4 to 5 people in an actual reporting relationship. You hire people, you develop people, you potentially have to let people go if things don't work out. Like it's a very different way of leadership. So that for me was very new coming from consultancy. I also suddenly started having to make, or being allowed to make, decisions. I mean, in consultancy, all I did beforehand, I drew slides and I made recommendations, and they were good recommendations and they were thought through. But here I actually had to then implement my recommendations and take bets on things which, I perhaps didn't have the data on. So I actually had to, own my own business. And that was scary and fascinating at the same time. And then also I think having real business impact. I mean, with the recommendations that you give in consultancy, you draw something on a slide and it was, perhaps intellectually correct and perhaps even practically correct, but you never really see the results. It's rare that you see them through. At times I had a long project where I actually then saw through the transformation, but generally someone else takes your work and maybe they do it, maybe they don't, maybe they do it well, maybe they do it not so well, but you're not in charge of your own product. So that again is something that at Wayfair, I make a decision, I implement it together with the team, and then we together look at the results and we see whether we like them or not, and then we go on or we pivot or we go back or whatever. So it's fun.
And
a lot of fun.
You mentioned a lot of slides when you were consulting. Do you still draw them every day, or how is that?
I have drawn, I think, about 2 slides in my last 3 years here. I have a couple of teams who are very avid slide writers and they love it, but I personally have flipped to using Word. I think writing down full narratives with the occasional chart peppered in is a much neater way to tell a story than on a PowerPoint slide, but that's my personal preference. Do you still draw a lot of slides, Rodolfo?
On occasion, as I happen to be one of the teams that are very slide aficionados.
I'm very good at
it. Yeah, other than that, I also tend to stick just with Word, emails, and meetings. It's just easier to exchange actual words instead of images.
I think a narrative is much more robust in Word. Like I think in PowerPoint, you can hide a bad storyline because it jumps anyway from every slide to slide. So you can kind of let the gaps like cover things up. But if you write it down in Word, it becomes very apparent if there's something missing in your argumentation.
Completely agree. So moving a little bit away from consulting geeky things and moving into just plain geeky things, I saw you have a PhD in bioinformatics. So how does one go from that to leading the brand team in Europe and the brand of Wayfair in Europe?
So yeah, I studied mathematics and then did a PhD in bioinformatics, and I was definitely in the geek zone, like Star Trek, Isaac Asimov, Dungeons and Dragons was that is still very me. It's in my deep heart. I guess at the end of the day, Wayfair is still a place for quite geeky people. It's a home for everyone, but I think we have a certain geek factor to us. It's a tech company, and if you look at my CV, I mean, maths, bioinformatics, and then even afterwards in consultancy, I did a lot of. I worked for the healthcare sector a lot, and did a lot of strategy work there, which was also always very analytical. And then coming to Wayfair, I think again, like analytical work and having an analytical mindset is fundamental to everything we do. Now, one of the reasons why I love this job offer so much at Wayfair is that it's not just analytical, especially in my department. It mixes in with that creative sector, so with the whole brand and creative world, which I love and which was something which I always wanted to get involved in. And what I love about it at Wayfair is that we approach these topics, brand, marketing, creative, but from a very analytical point of view. So even deciding like what image should we put in an email to speak to our customers about sofas, that is highly analytically driven, how that image is optimized. Even before we launch TV spots, we have a very analytical approach to identifying which messages we should be placing. We always have various spots which we're testing in various lanes to then understand which one of them is driving the highest response rate. So everything we do is data driven, and that's why even with a bioinformatics PhD, I feel very comfortable at Wayfair.
Yeah, that's cool. So. Sounds like the common bridge there is just drawing between analytics and this creative thing, and that kind of unites your whole umbrella of teams, right? That's really interesting. I'll actually want to talk about that a little later. Okay. But before we get there, I have another question from your LinkedIn profile. So there you mentioned you have 2 kids and a husband that keep you, and I'm quoting, organized and sane. So I'm wondering, is that still the case during work from home times and COVID-19? How is Wayfair as an employer?
So I probably need to give that, yeah. I think I'm neither organized nor sane now during work from home, or at least not as much as beforehand. Having said that, I think I'd probably be even less sane if I didn't have the kids to distract me. So no, I mean, I think I've got two kids. My daughter is 7. My son turned 4 years old yesterday, and they are very active children. So they need a lot of attention, which is great. They have little personalities. And being a full-time mum of 2 personality-rich children is certainly not easy. Yeah, of course, it's tough, I think, in any job that you have. There's, being a full-time parent, come to that. It's not just a thing of being mums. But I think it really works very well at Wayfair because of 2 things. So first off, Wayfair is an employer who gives their employees a lot of flexibility. It's up to you how you structure your day. So I can easily just put a blocker in my calendar every afternoon when my daughter comes from school to do schoolwork with her. And that's fine. That's my choice. Then I just, catch it up somewhere else. So that flexibility makes it very, very easy. And the second thing I think is just also a deep understanding and support of parents. So everyone in the leadership team, men and women, is a parent, and also the male leaders are very hands-on with their kids. They very often say, "Oh, I can't make the meeting at 4 o'clock because I'm picking up my son or daughter from Kita." So it's not like you feel as a woman that you're the odd one out because, "Oh no, sorry, whoops, I need to take care of the children." It's just like it's a thing which people have to do who have kids, and a lot of people have kids. So that's it. And sort of if I look at the KPIs, how would I measure whether an employer is or whether an employer is supporting me as a working parent? I play with my kids every day for an hour before I pop them to bed. I pop them to bed myself every day. I can visit my daughter's ballet classes on a Wednesday afternoon if I have to. And I think that's the most important one, I'm not opening up my laptop generally after supper, because that's, I think, the trap that a lot of parents fall into. They're like, "Oh yeah, I do all these things, and then I work from 8 until midnight," which sucks because that's not really sustainable. So yeah, it's working well.
And I can attest to your children being full of energy. They occasionally jump into the room. And it's always a comical point in the meeting.
Hopefully they have clothes on most of the time. That's when it really falls down, when you see these 2 naked children run in the room and society just breaks down. But
it always reminds me of the BBC video.
Yeah.
Jumping from that to Wayfair's culture. So you already mentioned a little bit how supportive Wayfair is of all the working parents and this whole situation. Is that what defines Wayfair's culture, or what do you find unique that you really like about working at Wayfair?
So for me, a culture is defined ultimately by the people you hire. That's the driving force behind it. And I think there are 3 criteria or traits we look for in candidates at a very broad level and across all roles. And I think they are quite specifically Wayfair, especially in their combination. And those criteria are people are smart, driven, and kind. So smart, I think, we're a tech company. We're very analytical. Everything we do, you need to have that processing power. I think that's a given, and that is something I think which every tech company will ask for. Driven, I think, is something which in a startup environment, you need people who take decisions, who roll up their sleeves, who do things, who are not afraid of taking on something ambiguous and just pushing through it. Like, everyone needs to have that drive. I think that also makes our Wayfair. We are not, we think, but we also do, which is I think refreshing. And then that third aspect, kind, that is, I think, something which is quite uniquely Wayfair. And by kind, I mean people who make decisions for the broader company, who don't try and push themselves forward, who are highly collaborative, who can forgive other people for, you know, any mistakes that they make, who always assume good intent in other people. That's what I mean by kind. And I think it's, you know, I mean, I think it's nice to work for a company where people are kind, but I think it also really helps us from a business perspective because, you know, we grow so quickly. We need to make so many decisions. We have this very, you know, fail fast, pivot mentality. You need to work in a consistent, safe zone to be able to encourage that kind of spirit. Yeah. If I'm afraid that I'm going to get slapped by my boss for making a mistake, then that's going to kill any entrepreneurial spirit. If, you know, if I only have my own interest at heart, I'm going to make decisions which benefit me, but not the company. So that, you know, kindness, I think, is very fundamental to who we are and ultimately defines our culture. And yeah, like then part of that being also understanding of people's private lives, be it, you know, working parents or whatever other private topics people have, I think is an manifestation of that, but it is much broader than just that.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's a very comprehensive way to put it. The smart driven and kind tripod, so to say. Now, being a little bit of devil's advocate, what are the challenges that Wayfair has? What are the things you think we still haven't quite figured out yet?
I think we could do a lot better. I think we are already quite good in the market, but it's just a very difficult thing, is I think cracking inspirational shopping. So that the home sector is obviously a sector where, you know, people, there's a lot of visual shopping. People often don't really know, what is my style? How does this item fit into, you know, the furniture that I already have? So being able to really tap into that sort of shopping experience, being able to really show people, you know, furniture and by style or by price point that really, you know, suits their needs, showing them how it looks in their space, like everything around 3D visualization. I think there is a lot of opportunity there, and we're working on that. And I don't know anyone who does it better than us, but I think we could be like, that's where I see the future. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, if you think about both the tooling and the inspirational shopping, like, what's your take?
I was just going to say that my follow-up question to you is actually going to be, is there anyone that has cracked that? Because that is a really hard problem. So at least on that side, you know, we're just off par.
I think people have cracked the inspirational shopping if it's very niche. Yeah, West Wing is visually very appealing, but then you don't really need to personalize for West Wing because they have exactly one style and one type of customer. I think our challenge is, like, how do I address every single customer across all the different styles? But anyway,
with the tens of millions of products that we have.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with you on the problems there, the tech and data architecture, especially, because that is something I'm looking at very often. I think that kind of the subsequential problem out of that is kind of how our teams have developed. So the US is obviously a lot larger in terms of market size, in terms of team, than Europe is. We're kind of still in this startup mode or so. And the challenge there is we are tempted very often to go with very quick solutions that are kind of scrappy just to fix something. And that obviously is not the same sync as the US is. Everything is a lot more stable and professional and fine-tuned there. So the difficulty that I see for us is also globalizing everything in a scalable way. And we are making large strides for that. But yeah, we need to keep on investing. That's a challenge that we have to always, every day, constantly reassure ourselves and work towards fixing it. That would be my take, I think. That's just ensuring scalability as we look into growing eventually to other places or growing our current markets.
Yeah, fully agree. Couldn't agree with you more. Can I just quickly, I have to tell my kids to be quieter. They're a bit loud. I'm coming back in a second.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, they decided to position themselves exactly in front of the door and do a theater play. So
No worries. From my
Okay.
side, I could only hear when you were not talking, so I think
Okay.
they can cut it out. Okay, jumping back in after the commercials. So those are cool challenges. I think we can also kind of use that as a segue to talk a little bit more specific, instead of Wayfair, very broad, and more specific about your team and or your teams, should I say. What does your teams do on the broad level?
Such a good question. Whenever someone asks me what my teams do, I always end up explaining it in this roundabout way, because it's such a complex. The thing is, at Wayfair, especially in Europe, people generally just do a lot. Yeah, it's very often that people wear multiple hats. So the hats that I wear is sort of one pod. Essentially, it's two pods. One of them is everything around brand, creative, PR. So this is very sort of, the brand marketing aspect, TV, commercials, that kind of thing. That sits in my pod. And then the other pod is what we call commercial programs, which promotions also falls into, which Rodolfo, you lead, of course. And with commercial programs, this is essentially all the programs that our supplier partners can participate in to access premium shelf space on our site. So a couple of examples: promotions. We essentially ask suppliers, would you like to participate in Black Friday? And if so, they give us a discount and we feature their chair in one of our promotions. Another commercial program we have is our exclusive brands. So these are our own brands for suppliers who white label, which is about 80% of the market. And there we enable suppliers to access and essentially present their furniture as part of our brands, which is a great opportunity for them. And another commercial program is Wayfair Sponsored SKUs. This is a native pay-per-click program where suppliers essentially can bid to access, the second or the 8th position on our website for a specific class. So very different programs by which suppliers can access premium shelf space.
So you mentioned you have these two worlds, right? One is about shelf space and kind of selling that to the suppliers. The other one is more customer focused. It's more creative and more talking to the end customer that you have. Talking about you specifically, how do you bridge those two? How does a typical day for Saskia look like? Because there is a wide range of topics between one and the other world, right?
In all honesty, each one of those topics, PR, creative, brand, promotions, commercial programs, they each have a very strong lead on them. And chances are they run their day-to-day business. So my typical day consists of a bunch of cross-functional meetings, for example, with the US counterparts of these topics, or at the European level, if we've got a certain initiative we're driving through which has cross-functional impact, there I'd be involved. And then for various, elements of those, within those different worlds, if ever something pops up where you need senior guidance or we need to brainstorm. Yeah. So maybe this is, hey, should we have a UK, we've currently got Barbara Schöneberger as our German influencer. So the team might say, hey, listen, we think we should have a UK influencer. Let's have, a discussion. Here's a pre-read on the angle we think we should take. And then, we discuss that. Similarly, pricing might say, hey, we want to, run a test on promotional pricing. Here's a pre-read. Let's discuss. The theme here, I think, at Wayfair is pre-read meetings, but always with pre-reads. And then you focus your time on the discussion. So I think, in short, my day consists of reading pre-reads, attending meetings, saying, asking questions, and then hopefully a little bit of thinking time and quite some one-on-one time with my folks so that I can, unpack any topics they have, be it content or people related.
Yeah, and hopefully the pre-reads are not all in slide format. So
absolutely not.
No. Yeah, I liked your answer though. It touched a point on the earlier answer of what makes Wayfair's culture unique. You actually mentioned, most of my leads for the different teams, they carry on with most of the work. And I think that shows how much of a collaboration Wayfair is and how much we're trying to incentivize folks to have initiative, have innovative ideas, and follow through them, without having to a super hierarchical process, as you can see in some retailers.
Oh no, ideally, I would not have any content discussions with my folks, and they would just be driving. That is often, 80, 90%, like quite honestly, they know their business way more than I do. I'd probably make terrible decisions if asked. I think you should always be pushing decisions down to the lowest level, and those folks know best, so let them decide. Only if there's a question of uncertainty, or if there's like a really big stake at hand, like you're talking about like a big risk attached to a certain decision, or a big investment that's attached, that's I think where you should be escalating to leadership. Or if there's like some people topic, like it's just tricky for whatever reason, I think those are the topics you should be roping in, and also where I then rope in my superiors, where you should be escalating. But otherwise, just do it.
Yeah, so sounds a lot like your style of leadership is just making yourself as redundant as possible so you can sip margaritas on the beach.
Absolutely. There's unfortunately very few margaritas on the beach at the moment, but philosophically, yes, I am all for margaritas on the beach.
It's always a great goal to have. Okay, so we talked a little bit about Wayfair. We talked about your teams, touched a bit on your leadership style. If we move to people thinking about joining Wayfair, what would be your expectation of them? Like, what makes a Wayfairian success inside Wayfair, and by extension, what makes a good candidate for Wayfair?
I think I'd have to ladder back to my smart, curious, and kind, and perhaps to just translate how I would expect that to manifest itself, within an interview, what I'd look for in a candidate. Like smart, I'd look for them. I'd look for what kind of background they have, what kind of, what have they studied, what are they interested in? A lot of people whom we hire have a STEM background, but, we also have folks who studied history or, music or whatever, like anything goes. I think.
Or bioinformatics in that case.
That I would classify as STEM, but yes. I think looking for people who have like either a technical data-driven background or a strong interest in that, would be something. I think for driven, I'd look for people who've like made, bold career choices, who've tried to go out there, who push themselves forward, who also in their spare time are curious and pick up new topics and like deep dive into things, and just like try and push the envelope on their own development. And then kind, I think generally you get a good screen on someone within like 45 minutes on whether they're kind or not. We always have the discussion whether people showed ego or not. And ego, I think people can be very confident in a good way and in a not so good way. And we want the good way confident. We want the people who are, truly, deeply at ease with themselves, and thus have the time and space for other people, as opposed to not that confident with themselves, and thus more loud and boisterous and a bit showy-offy, and that is what I think we do not want so much. So
that's very nicely put. I completely second that. I think also we always apply cases, right, regardless of the level. So we can get a good read on how smart they are, how driven they are, even how kind, if they are just powering through the whole resolution. That's probably the bad kind of ego. But yeah, if they're collaborative, that's what really makes us tick.
And I love the fact that we do cases at every level. Like even if we hire a senior partner from McKinsey, they have to go through a case, and possibly even the same case that a manager needs to go through. But there are no favorites when it comes to case studies at Wayfair. It's one of our, and I think it is one of the most insightful mechanisms, as you say, to not just screen for critical thinking, but for everything, like for communication, like how structured is the person in the way they outline their thinking. yeah, how driven are they? How curious are they in asking questions? It's not always about finding the right answer. It's about asking the right questions. And yeah, and how kind are they? How do they perform under pressure? Yeah, because everyone's going to be under pressure in a case study. So, you know, under pressure is when your true animal shows itself. And what is their true animal? Yeah, it's interesting to see.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think we already kind of answered the next question I was thinking was any tips for candidates in the interview process. But it seems like essentially we're looking for people that under pressure can essentially meet those 3 guidelines, right? They show to be smart, driven, and kind. Anything else you can think of?
Be your true self. I think I've never met anyone who is a good actor, like not good enough to pass a good interview. Like everyone can read it. So just be your true self and don't try and bullshit.
Yeah, I think that was it from our side. It was very insightful to talk to you. I really like your take on our challenges, why Wayfair is a great place to work, and also the little tripod and smart, driven, kind is a very nice way to look at how Wayfairians are.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Rodolfo, for doing this with me. That was great. And I found your questions very insightful. And yeah, hopefully a lot of people see this who decide that Wayfair is a fabulous employer and they want to apply. We'd be excited.